good afternoon, morning, afternoon, and evening to our listeners across the globe. I'm rusty today because we missed a couple of weeks with our podcast. But here we are today on season 4, episode 44 with Perdita Finn. And I'll pass the mic to my co host, Susie Vaughn, who's in Ireland enjoying the heat over there in Europe. Susie, welcome back.
Hi, Ramsey. Hello, everybody. We're so glad to be back here. I've been looking forward to this episode for quite a few weeks now. I've had the pleasure of reading Perdita's latest book and really familiarizing myself with her work again. Our guest today is an amazing author. She's an incredible insight into the divine feminine, into really healing our ancestral traumas and making that connection. Her book that we're going to talk about today, partly anyway, hopefully, is Mothers of Magic. It was just released there in May. And in it, she's braiding the memoir, history, and kind of spiritual inquiry, introducing us to the kind of maternal guides that we all have access to, really, but we kind of have forgotten them, or we've kind of not given them the importance that they probably could have in our lives and the difference that would make. So I know I studied Joan of Arc with Perdita many years ago during the pandemic there online, and it was an amazing sort of awakening of that divine feminine aspect within myself. So all the way from the Catskill Mountains, I think it's near Woodstock, we have Perdita Finn, and we are so grateful that you're here to join us. Thank you for coming in.
Susie, it feels very, very special for me to be here. A real honor. Thank you for having me on, and particularly because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know you have ancestors who endured the worst of the witch atrocities in Europe as well, which I read about.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think those witch wounds are in more of us than we realize. You know what I mean? They're in every family when you look into it, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's what I discovered in my book too, was those hidden witch wounds that are hiding out, and the way we feel about our grandmothers and mothers, and within ourselves. There's a huge central part of my book.
Well, before we get into the nitty gritty and really get down and dirty with the book, which I'm really looking forward to, I want to know, like we ask all our guests, when did you really start to discover that you were, after entering this portal, you were on some sort of a pathway with the work and with all of the research you've done and covered?
I think it really began in earnest for me when I became a mother. And I'd been a spiritual explorer and adventurer, but having children changed that exploring, because children weren't welcomed in any of the spiritual communities that I was participating in. I was a Zen student, and the kids had to be up in a cabin, and I wasn't allowed to bring my baby into the Zendo, and that brought up a lot of questions for me, and I ended up leaving. And then I went to a local Episcopal church, and I ended up, ex-Buddhist nothing that I was, teaching Sunday school, because I was the only person who wanted to be with the kids. And I didn't want to farm out that spiritual inquiry with the children. And so I began asking, what's going on here? There's something that really the matter at the heart of religion. And I was feeling particularly unmothered as a young mother, the way many, many women feel, which was, I had my own mother was older and suffering from a vascular dementia. She was living with me in diapers, and I was overwhelmed, and my mother-in-law was many thousands of miles away. And I felt I had this longing for a circle of grandmothers. Where are the wise women? Where is the circle of wise women to hold me? And they weren't there. And yet in the dark at night, when I would put my children to bed, I began finding myself just intuitively calling on my dead grandmothers. I called on my grandmother Molly, who raised 6 children during the Depression with no money. I called on my grandmother Nellie, who was an extraordinary gardener. I called on my grandmother Catherine Harrington, who died in childbirth and didn't
Wow.
see her children grow, whose children got thrown out on the street and had to survive as, little urchins until they got to America. So I called on these women. I found myself, at first it was a kind of wordless SOS, but then it got specific. Help me with this 2-year-old who keeps having temper tantrums. Help me figure out how to teach this kid to tie their shoelaces. Help me get this kid to eat something other than hummus. You know what I mean? I began having really specific asks of my grandmothers. And the extraordinary thing, Susie, was I experienced them as showing up.
Wow.
I asked for help and the help arrived. Sometimes it was a check in the mail. Sometimes it was an afternoon that was easier than I imagined. And I began to feel mothered. And I began to have a completely different relationship to souls on the other side. And that 30-year journey that I've been on with that, over 30-year journey at this point, I didn't have any guidance for it. I began asking them for help and they began showing up. I began in gratitude. I made an altar to them. More grandmothers started showing up. More dads started showing up, And as your children get older, their needs get different. And gosh, you have a lot of things you have to pray about.
And was prayer your main way of asking for help? Is that how it came about?
Prayer is asking for help. Prayer isn't, we think, real prayer comes when we have a desire and we ask for help. And the way we get in relationship with those on the other side is they show up for us. I don't see the dad. I don't hear them, but I experience them as real because they really do come through for me. And I think about, I'm a mother. My children are grown now. They're in their 30s. And what I love best is when they call me up and ask for something. Mom, how do I make a chicken? Mom, can you send a check? And then I'm useful. Excuse me. Excuse me.
No.
So just like I like being asked for help and it makes me feel useful, those on the other side are no different. Our mothers, our fathers, our teachers, our neighbors. And the deeper I went with this work, Susie, the more I began to realize that everyone on the other side, whatever their gender had been when we knew them, whatever their species had been when we knew them, remembered that they were a mother to us when they died. And that's what it meant to die. It meant that we remembered in one incarnation or another, we've all been each other's mothers. And when we get the mothering we need, when we begin to feel resourced like that and loved like that, it's amazing how much more you can give those you love and how much you have to give the world.
Wow. Yeah. Like, it's interesting because obviously I met Ramsey through mediumship. And so connecting with the dead and hearing them, is something that, that we discovered together, when we were studying it with our teacher. And that really was a living proof for me as having that direct experience, and Ramsey too. But, you realize that the veil is very thin, like when you call out, something is responding. Like when you pray, there's there's an ask. I often will put an ask in as I'm going to sleep. And when I wake up and meditate in the morning, quite often, an answer will sort of meet that question. Some format or a sign or something will come through,
A lot comes through. And, I teach people how to do this. And the hardest part is getting people to ask for help. They don't feel worthy. They feel scared they're not worthy enough. They feel scared they're going to be ignored, right? And that they're not loved enough. And so I always say, start really small. Start really small. You don't have to ask for world peace yet. You know what I mean? Don't ask for bliss of the beyond. Ask for something you need. And I had this young woman, and she had just planted a bunch of trees in her backyard, and a drought had descended where she lived, and the trees were all dying. And she said, what can I do to save them? She asked some people, and they said, you've got to mulch them. You've got to water them, but you've got to mulch them so they can hold on to water. But all of the nurseries she went to and all of the stores she went to were out of mulch because everybody was doing the same thing. And so she didn't know what to do. She couldn't find any mulch. So she had this uncle, Uncle Nino, I remember. And she said, Uncle Nino, I want you to find me some mulch. And she got out a picture of Uncle Nino and she looked at it and she was putting it on her fireplace mantle when she heard the noise of a truck backing up outside, like, you know, beep, 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 beep. And so she put the photo down and she went and looked out the window. And there was a giant pickup truck at her neighbor's yard overflowing with wood chips. And she ran outside and said, what are you doing? She said, I'm delivering some wood chips. She said, do you have any extra? He said, sure. And then she wrote to me and she was actually quite frightened by the experience because she asked, and the answer was so immediate that her whole worldview changed. You know what I mean? She said, the dead are real. And I said, yeah, I know. They're real. Your Uncle Nino loves you. I said, what are you going to ask him for next? And she said, can I ask him for love? I said, of course you can ask him for love. And now she's married.
Wow. Wow.
Amazing.
You know, and, you know, but it's also true that sometimes we ask for things. You know, we ask for, you know, the sugared candy cereal for breakfast, and mom says, how about a bowl of oatmeal? You know, I mean, you know, that's also true. I've gotten a lot of bowls of oatmeal, I'm just saying.
But even sometimes you don't need to ask, and the sign is there for you to take on the fruit that they have prepared for you.
Yes.
And I find that amazing.
Yes.
So how, from like Susie said, we did the mediumship, but I'm sure not everybody walked our path. Is that how would you tell someone to speak to their ancestors, or what form of a question, or the question in which form should it be in order for them to kind of reply back?
Okay. People often say they want a sign, like, give me a sign you're really there. And I always think that's sort of, people don't really know what they're asking. What they're saying is, prove to me you're real, and then we can get down to business. But the only way you can really discover they're real is if you get down to business. And you're going to have to take a risk and think about what you really want, truly, madly, and deeply. And I think that when, again, I begin my morning, my husband and I begin our morning fretting, worrying, where we are Olympic class worriers because we have children, we have an aging house, we have aging pets, we have cars, we live in this world that's collapsing all around us. There's a lot to be worried about, right? We have bodies that are aging, you know, from our own health to the health of our children. But every time I have a worry, I connect it to someone on the other side. I give it to someone on the other side. And so when that worry is eased, I feel tremendous gratitude to that individual. And so start with what you need. You know, people who don't have money know a lot about prayer, but we live in an economy of money. And so we think, you know, our prayer becomes, let me win the lottery so I don't have to think about it, right? But instead, what if we just began asking for our daily needs? I mean, I have found that the dead are very, very precise. If I ask for something that I need money for, they will give me the money I need for that thing and not 2 cents more. You know what I mean? Like, you know, this has happened to me many times, you know, and they don't want me getting in trouble. They don't want me losing that connection and relationship to them. What we forget is that our ancient ancestors, before civilization, before the arrival of a monetary economy, they lived in an economy of prayer. They prayed for everything to the ancestors. They needed to find food. You can go to the grocery store. So you prayed to your ancestors to show you where the berries were, or where the turkeys were, or where the deer herds were. You wanted to find a warm place to spend the night. So you prayed to your ancestors to lead you to a rock shelter or an overhang or a valley. You prayed to your ancestors to find water, to lead you to the wells and the springs. You prayed to your ancestors to find another group of people because you were sick of the group of people you were with and there were no dating apps. So you had to pray for everything.
Yeah.
And that prayer was to, the Aboriginal people of Australia have what are called song lines, that every rock, every tree, every geographical formation is connected to the story of their ancient ancestors. And so when they walk the land, they are telling the stories of those ancestors, right? Like the ancestors live in that land. And I think there's a lot of that still in Ireland, right, Susie?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, very much so. In America, we don't have that because, of course, we obliterated the indigenous people, of this country, and we obliterated their stories. But those are song lines, those stories of the ancestors, and they remind us that we can go out and call to them and ask for help with them, and they'll show up and answer us, and we'll have new stories to tell about them. And
yeah. Sorry, I let you finish. Let you finish. Go.
No, I can talk for my grandmother kissed the Blarney Stone. I will never shut up. So I try to remember to do it.
Okay. But no, like I love that you brought in the song lines there, because I really do believe that even if you don't have a direct, like I didn't have any grandparents growing up, as it turned out, in Ireland. And so I had no visual representation, no photographs, I didn't barely know their first names, very little about them. And so that whole lineage was something that I was quite cut off from growing up. But then when I was doing some of this kind of divine feminine work and reading the book, for example, it started to kind of like, it's there just because I didn't know about it. It's there, and it sort of reignited it for me. And I was finding myself like, washing the dishes, or I don't know, just doing something quite mundane. And ideas around my kind of feminine, the maternal lineage started to come to me. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I felt like when I was reading your book, it sparked that, like, it brought it to life in a certain way. So I really loved that it did that, because everybody has thousands and thousands of grandmothers.
We have 10,000 times 10,000 grandmothers. And until 150 years ago, we never had photographs of them, and what we had were stories, and people often used to make dolls. That was, the dolls come from wanting to make ancestors we could hold in our hands. And that's work I do with people sometimes, because it can be very powerful. But I'll give you an example. So I have this Irish grandmother. Her name was, I didn't know her name. And my grandfather came to this country when he was 17, and he and his father, their mother died in childbirth. Their father had died. She'd remarried a man. She got pregnant. She had 2 boys, and she married this other man and got pregnant and died in childbirth. And the stepfather threw both boys out on the street.
Wow.
And they survived. And they managed, and I don't know this woman's name either, but I credit her. Apparently they became errand boys at the local brothel. And only one of my aunts knows this story, because my grandfather kept this part of the story hidden, but I pieced it together. And they helped them get the money for steerage or whatever to America. So both boys finally get to America. And all I knew was that this woman had died in childbirth. I didn't know her name. I didn't know anything about her. But I would pray to her, and I would imagine what it must have been like to be bleeding to death on your deathbed, knowing that the man you were with was capable of what he was about to do. And there was nothing you could do to protect your children except from the other side. And I just felt such all I knew about her, Susie, was that this moment must have been agonizing, right? That transition moment for her. I didn't know her name. I would pray to her, though. Great, grandfather Matthew's mother, who died in childbirth. One day out of the blue, I got a package from a cousin who said, I found a photo of Grandpa Matthew's mother. And I know you have family history, so I'm sending it to you. I know it's of his mother, and that he had cherished it. There were a lot of kids, so, these things got disorganized. And she had sent it to me. It was a daguerreotype, one of these old daguerreotypes in glass. And it came through the mail. And in the mail, the glass had all broken. When I got it, I very carefully got all the glass off and the broken frame. and pulled the old, practically ready to fall apart picture out. And on the back of the photo, the daguerreotype was her name, Catherine Harrington.
Wow.
And I got her name. No one knew her. No one had known it. And with her name, I was able then to find out more about her. But I felt like that's how the communication for me works with the dead. I asked her for help. She gave me help. And then she sent me her name.
Wow.
Right? And
you couldn't make that up, you know?
What?
You couldn't make that up.
No.
You know, that's wow.
I'll show you. You want to see the picture of her?
Yeah.
Sure.
Have you got her?
She's always at my back. I always keep her at my back. Where is she? There she is. I don't know if you can see her. Oh, probably not very well. There she is.
Terrific glare.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good picture.
Yeah, it was a really good picture. And I keep it in here.
Wow.
And she's, you know, and so, but this has happened. We take our imagination and we also just let ourselves imagine what it was like to be them and to feel with them, right?
Yeah. I think that I think what's happening now is that, you know, people are looking for, you know, people have kind of abandoned, you know, organized religion. And, you know, like we talked about our run from kind of, you know, experiences that we had when we were younger before we came online. And so you're out there in the world and you're trying to seek, you know, meaning, and you're searching for something or other. And I think a lot of people are a little bit lost right now. Like there seems to be, you know, there's so much going on, like, and I feel like this is such a resource. It's such a profound resource, and it doesn't require even knowing your lineage. Ultimately, you don't know their names, you don't need to know all those stories, but just knowing that you did come from something, you know, you didn't crawl out from under a rock. And even if you did crawl out from under a rock, you know, the rocks are holding that energy anyway. You know, when I go into stone circles here, or I go to very old trees, you can feel it. Like the trees are carrying the stories, the rocks, the mountains. You know, they're alive with the stories. In Ireland as well, the rivers, the lakes, they're alive with.
When I was writing this book, Susie, I began calling on my mothers before civilization. You know, the women who remembered a world before patriarchal exploitation and violence, and the world that we live in. And the world we live in is based on misogyny, violence, war, and slavery. You know what I mean? Like it's been a catastrophe since And I wanted to pray to my grandmothers before that for guidance for these times. I don't know their names. I don't know who they were. You know what I mean? But I began calling to them. And Susie, I would go out every morning and I would walk up the mountain behind my house and I would call to these grandmothers. And by the time I was coming down the mountain, they would have told me what to write each day, so much so that I began some of the 9 of the chapters in the book. I don't even feel like I wrote. They showed up and told me what to write. Wow.
There you go. And it's just building on that, like you're building and building over time. Do you think, you know, like a lot of the history we know had a lot of violence. There were some really dark times for sure. And so they probably died with, you know, a lot of trauma, a lot of, like in Ireland, we had the famine, like there's just numerous things, the witch trials, you know, so people died in, you know, catastrophic situations at times. And they carry these wounds. And do you think that the asking and this kind of, you know, this giving and receiving is a healing? Is it like healing the lineage outside of time?
Something really radical. And I have a really radical take on this. Is this okay?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Every one of our ancestors since the beginning of civilization 6,000 to 8,000 years ago in has been a victim of trauma. Civilization is trauma. It's not a side effect of civilization. It's what it does. It's always benefited the 1% and always enslaved everybody else. We got a lot of trauma. We have a lot of ancestors who are not traumatized, however. We also have ancestors who weren't human. We've all been here before. The mother's way is a circle, not a line. the patriarchal way is progress, evolution, better and better, each and every day, up and away, transcend this broken world and go off to Mars with Elon Musk. The mother's way is that we live in great and beautiful circles and cycles of becoming. We've all been here before. We're all going to be here again. There's no getting up out of this world. We're coming back to the very world we've made. Now, we carry certain things with us in our souls, but the idea that the dead need healing is an invention of civilization.
Okay.
And let me explain that. In the beginning, we see a lot of feminist scholars have reported that we didn't have institutional religion before civilization. Go back in any country around the world, any religious tradition, and you find not a singular monotheistic God, but usually a pantheon, often 9 mothers.
Mm-hmm.
The 9 muses in Greece, the 9 manifestations of Durga, the 9 Icelandic goddesses, the 9 mamas of the Kogi people. I can keep going on and on and on telling you the 9 mothers. There are lots of them. But what happens with civilization is nobody wants to do civilization. It sucks from the get-go. Hunter-gatherer lifestyle is delightful. You're making art, you're telling stories, you work 2 hours a day, everybody has fun, everybody dances, life is good. Suddenly you're working 15 hours a day in the sun to grow food for somebody else. And there are 2 ways you get people doing that. One is with a police force, military, overseers, and the other is with religion. And religion becomes a way of telling people, you got to break your back now, your reward is coming later. And we don't want you talking to the dead. We want you talking to us, and we'll mediate with God.
Mm-hmm.
And Max Dashu, the feminist scholar, has documented how often the priests over the millennia would write to each other saying, we can't get people to stop talking to their dead grandmothers. Like people say, God, I don't know. What is foolishness? My grandmother now, she gets the job done. She knows what to do. And so how can you get people to stop talking to the dead? You have to make the dead twofold. One, you have to make them frightening. Oh, you got to be careful. You need ritual precautions, and then you create just what the Catholic Church did, which is a system of indulgences. The dead are in purgatory. They're suffering. You've got to focus on liberating them from their suffering. You've got to do spiritual busy work, liberating the dead. And that's going to keep you from liberating yourself. That's going to keep you from overcoming your own slavery. It's going to keep you paying money to the priests to help you do it.
Yeah.
And that's what they're all about. So what I say is, one of the great gifts of dying, just like think about how you feel when you go to bed at night and you're upset and you're distraught and you're tense and you finally manage to fall asleep. And you wake up 6 to 8 hours later and you feel renewed. It's not that you've forgotten what happened, but your body has let go of that. When we die, it's no different. When we die, the great liberation, the great healing.
Yeah.
I think the dead don't need healing. The living need healing. And our relationships with the dead need healing. And so for my father, my first book, Take Back the Magic, is about my father. And by the time he died, Susie, he was a mess of a guy. He had not lived the life he wanted to live. And it made him stingy and angry. And I found out after he died, even though he died in my arms, saying the Hail Mary, even though I found out he'd cut me out of his will, which it wasn't so much even about the money as the hatred felt so awful. And it's very hard to cut your children out of your will. You have to use a lot of hateful language. And I was so mad at him. And then I began asking him for help. Was my father stingy and impossible from the other side? No. My father saw what he had done alive and wanted to make amends to me. And my husband now jokes that my father has been so generous from the other side that it's a good thing he cut us out of the will.
Wow.
So I'll give you an example. My daughter was very, very ill as a teenager, and we spent all of our money trying to get her to the best doctors. We don't have very good healthcare here in America, and it's really hard and expensive to get healthcare. And we took out a second mortgage on our house, and we maxed out our credit cards, and we kept going to doctors, and doctors kept sending us to other doctors, and those doctors kept wanting us to do more and more tests. And everybody told us she was really, really sick, and they didn't know why. And then, we lost our jobs. And we got into trouble with the IRS, which is the tax revenue in America. And it was scary. It was really, really scary. And we didn't have any safety net. And we had a sick kid. And so one day I had to get on the phone with the tax authorities to ask for help. Like, what are they? I didn't know. Were they going to take our house? We had a sick kid. Were they going to take everything we had? Were we going to lose what little we had? But before I got on the phone with the IRS, I talked to my father here. I said, Dad, come on. This is a nightmare. Help me. Do something. And my father's name was Matthew, by the way. I said, Matthew Finn, you do this. And when I got on the phone, the woman I spoke with said, I told her my story of woe. And she said, well, we have this category called uncollectible. Do you think you can pay your taxes next year? I said, yes, I promise we'll pay them next year. She said, we're going to make you uncollectible.
Wow.
What does that mean? I said, I've never heard of that. She said, we're going to erase your debt. I said, do I have to do anything? She said, no. So I was so freaked out about this. I couldn't believe it was real. I'd never heard of it. None of my friends had heard of it. That I went to my accountant. I'd been going to the same accountant for 20 years. My husband and I drove over to his house. I told him this experience. He got on the phone for a long time, and he looked at us and said, the IRS has deemed you uncollectible. You do not owe these back taxes.
Incredible.
And he said, this little old guy who I don't think had any religious experience said, it's a miracle. And I said, I'm taking it. I'm taking the miracle. As we walked out of his office, I noticed there was an abandoned building I'd never noticed before across from his office. And in front of the abandoned building was this statue of this old guy with a long beard holding a book. And for the first time in my life, I was curious about this statue, which I'd never really seen before. So I went back inside and asked the secretary, I said, what's that building before? Who's that guy? And she said, oh, that's an abandoned Catholic church. It used to be St. Matthew's.
There you go. That's how it happens.
That's how
magic. Wow.
Did my father need healing? My father and I needed to heal our relationship. That was. Am I mad at him anymore? No. Do I send prayers to him in gratitude for his love every day? Every day.
That's such a beautiful example. Wow. So really, it's not about trying to heal the past. It's about being fully present, but realizing that the past, our lineage has our back.
Exactly. And they love us. A friend of mine who's an extraordinary psychic, I wrote a book with her. She had to teach herself to separate the living and the dead from each other when she was a child. And we would walk into a room together and she would say to me, she'd hold my hand and she'd say, how many living people are in this room? Because she had a hard time figuring it all out. She's amazing. And I love her with my whole being. But I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. She said a lot of people, when they die, their first words, forgive me for swearing, is kind of, oh shit, I didn't know that. If only I'd known that when I was alive.
Wow.
And I guess my vow has become, I want to see with the eyes of the dead while I'm still alive. I don't want to have that moment when I die. I want to give enough love and care to the world and my friends and my family and this earth before I die. So when I die, I said, well, I did what I could, but I'm going to keep on going,
Yeah. Like it's profound, the stories and examples that you've shared there, they're really something special. And people will probably have the thought, oh, well, that doesn't happen to me. I'm just a regular, people don't believe it can happen to them. But, the book title is Mothers of Magic, and like there's a reason that you've used the word magic there. And I think, what's your definition around magic in relation to the book, and in how people could maybe apply this to themselves?
Well, magic is organic and ordinary and unexpected, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's magic to see a flower blooming at the side of the road. Sometimes it's magic to watch a dandelion crack the asphalt. I'm not talking some Technicolor, Harry Potter candy coming out of thin air magic. I am talking about the magic that sustains us and feeds us. There's that moment when Jesus, the loaves and the fishes, and he feeds the 5,000, right? And did he make, food come out of thin air? Or did he have the ability to get people to take out a little bit of bread here, a bit of fish here, some lentils here? And suddenly everybody started contributing the little they had, and there was enough.
Mm.
And the magic was organic, not Technicolor, not industrial. And for me, magic is, the whole world feels magic to me, in that I am astounded by the beings that feed me, that love me, that show up every day. And I, was it magic when I was deemed uncollectible? You better believe it. Is it magic when we fall in love?
Mm.
I hold a lot of circles where people are invited to share their miracles and their magic. And those miracles and magic are healings between family members they never thought were possible, right? Oh my gosh, suddenly me and my kid are getting along again and talking to each other. Suddenly I'm in relationship with my father again. They're healings of their body. I've seen, please, go get whatever treatments feel right, but also pray to the dead. I do both.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many miracles of healing that come with the dead. And miracles, I live on an economy of prayer financially, and I have more abundance than but I've never won the lottery. I'm not, my bank account doesn't look very good, but my life is magical. I prayed. It does mean you have to ask what you want. You have to ask. The priests don't want you to ask what you want. They want to tell you what you want. They want to tell you, you want to be a good person and go to heaven. But what do people really want? They want love and healing and community and joy. And, those are miracles when we have them.
Love your stories. Love the way it is forward. You don't have to hide anything.
No.
You just have to let it out from the heart. That's the beauty of it. I think
Right.
that's where the magic rises in your story.
We were talking about the priests in the beginning, and it's so hard. It's so, here they are trying to be very, very good people. And instead of being very, very good people, so many of them, and in many religious traditions, all of them, by the way, they all end up being very, very bad people and hurting people because they don't dare to ask for what they really want.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like people who don't know what they want become very dangerous.
Yeah. And people aren't clear about what they want either, though. I think that's part of the problem. I think society tells us what we should want,
Yes.
what we should be desiring. So it's kind of hijacking us a little bit.
Constantly.
And so it's kind of where do you find that point of connection that you start to really get true to yourself and, dig a bit deeper, like, what do I truly want here? And I think it's usually when people are in a very stressful situation or, in their hour of need, let's say, and that's where the real prayers come out. I remember I was flying to New York with my mom and my sisters, and we're halfway across the Atlantic, and out of nowhere, my mom started having some sort of it was a sort of like a seizure or something on the plane, and they brought down the oxygen, and like I thought she was going to die on the plane, right? And now they had called a doctor and a nurse, so mom was surrounded by people. We're halfway across to New York, And it was so weird, Perdita. What came to me in that moment wasn't like I couldn't get in there and help. I'm not medical. I went to the toilet, locked myself in, and I prayed like a mad woman. And I was praying to my mom's sister, to my aunt who'd passed. And I was like, you're going to have to get in here. You're going to, we're all on this trip to New York. She's going to walk off that plane. You're going to, gotta help us out here. I was beseeching her with like it just came. I was like a crazy woman. And then, I just kind of washed my hands, dusted myself off, came back out. And I said to my little sister, I said, well, I just prayed like a crazy lady in there. So something might change. And Mom started coming around and they were, the oxygen was helping. And, they said, by the time we landed in JFK, they were like, just bring her to a medical room tomorrow or something. But, have her checked out, but she's fine now, And I was like, cool. And we were, it was a big treat for her birthday, and we were getting picked up by a limo and going to her favorite hotel. She wanted to always go to the Waldorf Astoria. And, like literally, like it went from like, are we all going to be having our mother dead on the plane halfway across the Atlantic? Or was she? So, we took her off in a wheelchair and we brought her into the hotel and they upgraded us to a bigger suite. We told them, listen, we were having a really shitty time here. And it really got quite magical, I have to say, I really felt my aunt had just like arrived on the scene. She was like, right, I've got it. I've got this,
And we're gonna. I know it's gonna feel a little dicey, but we're gonna get you that better room.
When my sister was like, I think we could get an upgrade on this. I was like, do you really think that we need that right now? I remember at the time, just kind of we laughed a lot about it afterwards. When finally, my mom, she was fine. Like the next day, she was like, I don't want to go to the medical room. I want to go to Bed Bath and Beyond. And I was like, oh Jesus, Mom, like come on, So yeah, like it really can be. It's in us to do it. Like I wouldn't have done that before, but the needs were there. The must was there,
Pray when we're in desperation and need, and that's certainly true of me of how I came to it. My daughter got sick is when I really started praying in a whole new way. But we can have magic every single day, and there are things that feel really hard. Like when I was for my book, Take Back the Magic. I had this moment where the publisher showed me the cover for the book, and I was like, oh no, that sucked. That's horrible. And at first I'm about to have like my fit, right? Like, oh, what are we going to do? They're never going to get it right. Oh, this is terrible. It's going to ruin my book. And I just pulled back and I went to my altar and I'm looking around. I'm going, who's going to fix the cover? Who's the artist here? And I found my middle school art teacher, who was a great guy, Richard Mello. I said, Mr. Mello, please inspire the design team and my publisher. And I wrote a nice little letter back. I said, I don't think this is quite there, but I have faith in you guys. You're going to do it. You're going to come up with something great. And lo and behold, it was a marvelous cover. But I knew Mr. Mello had helped out.
And a marvelous book too. I really loved that book. I've often recommended Take Back the Magic to people that I work with, because I'm like, you don't have to carry your whole life by yourself, lads. You've got to call in your dead, put them to work, disappear, decide, put out the intention there and then let go. It's all about really, I think it's part of surrendering to something better, realizing, okay, this isn't quite it.
You do, right? They know that they have really good ideas. Like, I remember, I'll tell you, my son was, married to the wrong person in the wrong job, living in the wrong city, and I was despairing. I just like, oh no, what's going to happen? And I put a whole team on him. I was praying hard, and it might have been looking pretty witchy at this point. And now he's living 5 minutes from me with a woman I love, doing work he loves, successful, happy, joyous, comes over, drops by, gives me a hug. But that was the dad. That was the dad. That was all of his mothers and grandmothers and fairy godmothers on the other side.
So Ramsey, will you put up the book before you say something? I really want to show the cover of Mothers of Magic. I think this is it's such a Wonderful book. I read it every night. I read a little bit every night, and I kind of took it into my dream state, and then woke up and kind of chewed over it while I was having coffee. I really, really highly recommend it. It's really about a path towards making that connection and that source of love, moving from the fear to love. I think summoning the wisdom of our ancestors. I hope everybody gets to see it and buys it online, buys it on Amazon or wherever, your local bookstore ideally. But wherever you can get hold of it, I highly recommend it.
Thank you so much.
Also, you can, I believe it's on Google Books, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't you narrate like 10 minutes of it?
There's an audiobook that I narrate, yes.
Oh, okay.
The whole Audible.
Audible. I think I saw it on oh, and anyways, I was doing quick research. I found it. I played it. I heard your voice. You were narrating at the beginning, but then I had to run to the podcast. But it is out there, so I do recommend people to check it out.
And another great way for Perdita's work, which I get every week as well, is your Substack. There's lovely, whether you're a paid subscriber or, you can really get some. I love your take on things. It's so refreshing, and it's so well researched. I think you're in it. It's not like from kind of out there. It's really from your heart, and your heart and soul is in your writing and your work. And I think we need to have these conversations. We need to get this moving. What's your
Substack subscribers, a monthly conversation where people just come and bring their stories about the other side.
There you
go. And every single person has them. Even people you don't think have them have. I mean, if you've done mediumship, everybody has these experiences, right?
Yes, but some people kind of shy away from that idea, or out of fear or out of conditioning. So they kind of either push it aside or they repackage it in a way that works within their environment. And that's why sometimes it doesn't resonate with them, that an ancestor is there with them. But the truth is, they are there with us. I can vouch for it. I've had a lot of experiences during my life, so that Susie and you. So it does happen, and it is there. It's just for us to accept it.
It is. It's hard. It's hard to, and it can be frightening, that moment when you realize they're real. I mean, I know my son had a moment, he was sort of Mr. Science for a while there, trying to dismiss all of his mother's spiritual stuff. And he was home from college and he was alone in the house. And I don't know, he was making a sandwich in the room right next door to me, there's an open wall here. And all of a sudden, every picture on the ancestral altar fell off the ancestral altar.
Oh my God.
For no reason. And when I got home, he was shaking. Wow. And he said, Mom, what's going on? Are they haunting me? What's going on? I said, they're having a really hard time getting your attention.
Yeah, it's easier to just tune in rather than resist it,
And that's the thing. Like I always say when people talk about hauntings and stuff, I say, well, the dead are trying to get your attention. They don't want to have to do this stuff. But if you're not paying attention, they get loud.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I prefer them to be very quiet.
Agree.
Well, in my experience, I had my dad that I wasn't sure who was trying to talk to me, to a point that was harassment. That's what I called it. It was harassment with songs from the 50s and the 40s, which I knew nothing about. And it was like I had to hum it into YouTube to figure out what the song was, what it was about. And then I go, oh, now I understand. It was a harassment. And at the end, I go, could you please just say it in words or just show me the way and just let it be. Stop this because I can't take it.
It reminds me of like when my son loses touch with me and I start sending him too many like viral cat videos. I just trying to get a rise out of him.
Yeah, it's true. They're not gone that far. Like when we met on the mediumship, I didn't even know we were doing mediumship. I thought it was a different program. I thought I was on Awakened Mind. I was interested in the mind mirror aspect, you know.
Uh-huh.
And then she was like, no, we're talking to the dead now. I was like, oh, give me a break. So I figured I wouldn't probably get beyond the first day, you know, because I had no experience or interest. And then when we sat down in breakouts, like the information would just come. And I was like, where did that come from? Like, it's kind of like you open the door or you open a channel or whatever it is, and the information can come in, you know, and when you're not in a place of fear and anxiety and worry and resistance, it does flow very naturally. Like, and I would just say at the beginning of all those sessions, you know, make me, use me. If this can be helpful for the person who I wouldn't know from, you know, they'd be a stranger, let's use me if this is how it's going to work. And over and over and over, you know, it came through the five senses, different times for different people. And then you started to see a pattern emerge that how much this was really helping people, you know, and get closure, deal with grief, you know.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we're so frightened that nothing continues. You know, I hate nothing more than when you go to a funeral and people will say like, oh, she'll live in your memory. And I think in my memory, I can't even remember what I ate yesterday, you know, like, you know, please don't say that. But, you know, the truth is that love doesn't die.
Mm.
You know, I say to my children, you know, I hope I live a long time, and I you know, I'm certainly trying to do everything I can to do so, but none of us know the time of the end. And we know that our love won't stop, and that you know, I know that there's going to come a moment when I'm going to look up and my mother's going to walk in the room and those grandmother Harrington is going to walk in the room and I'm going to say, oh, it's a new party about to begin. I can't wait to catch up. Here you are. And, you know, we've all, I mean, I've been at a number of deathbeds and people start to see the dead arriving.
Mm.
And I think if we know that we just go from one room to another, back and forth, always loving each other, no story is ever over.
Yeah. And from your ancestral, you know, the going way back, let's say, do you feel like that this kind of resurgence of the mother energy, the maternal or the feminine, is kind of, it's just the right time right now? This is when it's needed, or has it always been there, but it was just kept under wraps? You know, what's your kind of feeling about that?
I'll never forget a friend of mine. His grandmother was from Calabria in southern Italy, and she was a devotee of the Black Madonna. And she came to live with them. She didn't speak English. She would sit in her bedroom, this old Italian grandmother, and look at this Black Madonna statue and say her beads. And my friend, when he was a little boy, went to church, and there were all the blue and white, you know, Blessed Mothers everywhere. And one day he came in and he said to his grandmother, is that the Virgin Mary? Because they don't look alike, you know? And his grandmother spent a long time, and she looked at him and she finally said, no. And it really sent him on a spiritual journey because she said no. And what she was really saying to them, I have magic you don't even know about. I'm not with the church. And I think the old grandmothers have always been the holders. My grandmother, who was very different, she was a very pious, you know, mass every morning. You know, there was a picture of the Sacred Heart and JFK in her house. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to describe her Catholic devotion. But there was witchy stuff in the basement. And when she died, I write about this in my book, my cousin discovered that she had a giant jar of washed, dried chicken wishbones, unbroken. Why?
Mm.
She'd never made a wish. She'd never given a wish to a child or one of her 36 grandchildren. What was that? I think a lot of our grandmothers this old wise woman magic. And the reason I summon my grandmothers is, to come full circle again, I got kicked out of the Zendo, and I looked at the Zen master and I thought, you've had 3 wives, you've got kids from each of them, your life's a mess, you're still smoking cigarettes, he did die of lung cancer. I can see the whole story. And then I went to the Episcopal Church, and you're 32 years old, you don't know nothing. And I thought, like, I want grandmother energy. I want old, wise wisdom. And I think those grandmothers, I think right now, I want to circle the world, and I invite everyone listening to do this. Imagine a circle of grandmothers sitting around each of these political leaders all around the world. The Mohawk people used to do that. They used to put the grandmothers around all the men making decisions. They wouldn't say anything, but, thumbs up or thumbs down. They were, you know what I mean? Like, and what would the grandmothers say as the military leaders got ready to drop their bombs? What would the grandmothers say about the state of the climate? I think what we feel right now is, I want to put grandmothers around, the poor women of Afghanistan and the women in Iran and the women, who are really being oppressed around the world. And here in America, where women are dying more from pregnancy than ever before. I mean, the laws against women right now in my own country are terrible, terrible. And I want to circle the world. I want the grandmothers to rise up and come back. And I think we need to feel loved. And grandmothers know when you need a cup of cocoa, and they also know when you need a smack on the side of the head. And I think we need both. I think we need both.
Yeah. Here's the smack and follow it. Yeah. It's a beautiful sentiment. I love the concept of just circling the grandmothers around the world leaders right now, around the chaos and climate and everything that's going on there, and yeah.
And how can we become carers instead of herders again? It almost feels like our leaders all over trying to figure out how to hurt everybody more than anything, How can we make people feel better?
I think we have to go back to the basic of connection with oneself and also with one's ancestors, and that's how we can get back to the root of love. Basically, I
agree.
Yeah. And I believe your book was birthed at the right time for it to flourish and help out others in finding their way. At least that's how I see it after our conversation together.
I want our leaders to feel those mothers circling them and with their eyes on them.
Yeah. Because there's nothing like the presence of an elderly woman, particularly men as well, but there's nothing like the elderly
women
in the room.
Grandmothers.
And you
honor our grandmothers among some men.
You wouldn't speak a certain way. There's just a certain level of decorum that happens, and I remember, Ramsey, when you moved to Peru and you got this flower plant in your balcony you were telling me about, and it was relating to your grandmother, wasn't it?
Yes,
Jasmine, was it, or
jasmine? The jasmine tree. Yeah. Yes.
And she really appeared because you were there and you were like, for some reason I've got to go and buy this tree. And you brought it back, and then suddenly you kind of started to twig, okay, so she's there as a tree, so there are familiarities, there's smells that will bring her back. For you it was that, like for somebody like me, I don't have that, but there's certain links and images, and particularly when I was reading this book, they came to life. And they were like, listen, we're here all along. You just didn't have our name or our face to call us. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm missing a big part of it here. Like, so yeah, bringing it all back.
One thing I do, I do a lot of different practices around this, and I wrote the names of my ancestral grandmothers, the names I wanted to call them, the nonas, the gammies, the grannies, the nanas, and I wrote all the grandmother names I wanted to say, and then I made for each grandmother a doll. And I don't know who they were, but I do, and I began to bring them into me. And, this is some of the old magic. We know, in elephants and orca whales, when the grandmothers are excluded from the community, the teenage orcas and elephants go crazy. They go rogue. And part of the wisdom is knowing that you've got to bring the grandmothers in to get the herds to settle down. And I don't think it's any different with us as a species.
Wow, the penny has just dropped there for me. I have to confess here, because it's just like, wow, we spent so long forgetting, and and just refusing to kind of go there to the past because it's too painful or it's unknown or whatever the story is. Like, nobody wanted to talk about the witch wounds, we're going back to that. And
I'll talk only about that if you want.
Well, yeah, and then I think that's another episode, and then we started to unpick that, and it was like, oh, whoa, hold on. And it really it is still gathering momentum, so I think that's really important that we bring it all back, bring back that maternal line.
There's a saying that says, I am the daughter of the witches you didn't burn. And I am the witch you burned. And I remember, here I am.
Yeah.
I need to remember these things.
I went to Germany on that one, and I went to Lemgo, where there was a witch Holocaust there, and there's a witch Holocaust museum.
Wow.
It was intense. It was really intense. I couldn't even be in there. I was just like, I have to get out of here. And then we asked, where did the burnings take place there, and somebody said, oh, out in the Stadtwald. It's a forest now on the edge of town. And we walked and walked, and I knew the names of because a historian had given me this document about my husband's family, and my friend and I, we walked and walked and walked in this forest, and I was getting sick of it. And we crystals, we didn't really know what we were doing, but we were going to know when we got there, kind of thing. And I said, I've had enough. And we just sat on this bench, and I said, let's just throw these crystals into the ground, set an intention, and get out of here. And I went over to just what seemed like a random tree. And my friend, being German, she was like, I happen to have a trowel in my handbag. So she had a trowel. I'm digging up, as you do. I had a bunch of crystals that I brought from Ireland. I was like, okay, I'll just pop all these in. And this is for, my daughter and the generations that come after us, the ones that are here now and the ones before. Just made a very simple ritual. And then my friend said to me, she said, I'm going to have to take a photograph. And she said, and I said, oh, please don't take a photograph of this, And she said, no, I have to. I have to. She said, you're not going to believe this. She said, come back from where you are. So I took a few steps back, and it was a big tree. And the way people used to carve initials into trees, lovers, or whatever. There's this I have a photo, a big A and then a big L. And the names of the family members that were burnt in the historical documents in Germany were Annika and Lisbeth.
Wow.
And it was A and L. And I was just like, oh, okay. Rendered speechless. We
but
got
they may have been burned. It's like Joan was burned, Joan of Arc, but they're not gone. And
exactly.
And you only make them more powerful.
Yeah. I think by doing that work with the witch wound, it really, really liberated, because my daughter was living in Berlin at the time. Her name is Sophie too. And she messaged me. She said, I don't know what you're doing in Germany. I know you're doing witchy stuff. She said, but something has happened here. And my daughter isn't into the stuff at all. And she just said, some things really are after happening. And she felt it. And she was in Berlin at the time. Yeah, I think when we make kind of movements like that within our life, or create the rituals or the intent, it is always going to have an effect. Always. It always does.
And those women, and I call them by name in my book, many of them by name, particularly Alice Young, the first woman killed as a witch in the Americas. they are the ones we call on to help us rise that feminine energy back.
Yeah. And that's what the world is calling us
Yeah.
to do, isn't it?
It is.
Wow. What a great episode this is. I could chat to you all.
I know. I feel like we should, let's come for lunch. Let's sit down in my living room and let's go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories.
Ramsey, thank you, Susie.
Thank you all. And do take a look at the book, Mothers of Magic by Perdita Finn. It's in your bookstore right next to you, or on your app, Amazon, you'll find it there. Thank you so much for being with us, and hopefully we'll get together some other time to follow up on this conversation. It was awesome. And thank you to our listeners across the globe, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you so much.